Hey guys, today's video is on classical Chinese philosophy, and it's called classical because these ideas arose all around the same time period, but they have continued to influence Chinese thought for the last 2,500 years. So these ideas represent kind of the classical era of Chinese thought because they set a pattern for all future Chinese thinking. So you guys probably remember the Warring States period, which I mentioned last time. And it lasts for about 500 years. And during these 500 years, warring groups compete with each other, and they inflict massive damage upon one another without ever emerging as the sole winner. So even though these wars are going on for 500 years, which to me is difficult to imagine, 500 years of warfare, nobody emerges victorious, and the wars don't stop. So for 500 years, there's immense suffering as these little kingdoms compete with each other for dominance. This leads to a lot of new ideas about how to live and govern. Of course, people see the suffering going on around them, and they are motivated to try and come up with new ways of living that will bring about harmony and order in the world. The most important set of ideas that came out of the Warring States period come from a guy named Confucius. And Confucius was seeking to build a harmonious society, which makes sense because he was experiencing a society that had no harmony. Everything was chaotic and controlled by violence and brute power. And he hoped to bring about a society that was more orderly and peaceful and better for everybody. He believed that order would come about in society if everybody accepted their place within society. And he believed that what this meant, it would be superiors accepting their position of responsibility and living in a responsible way. That would mean taking care of the people they were in charge of, setting a good example, and living according to moral codes. And he believed that the inferiors, the people on the bottom of the social pyramid, more or less, that their job was to respect and obey the superiors and to try and follow the examples set by the superiors. And that if everybody did this, a society would become harmonious and everybody would be happier because of it. He also believed in this thing called filial piety. And basically what this means is filial piety is the respect of a son for their father. And so this meant that the son had an absolute duty to obey his father, even if a father was not wise or just. But hopefully, if a father was wise and just, this would be the best way of passing on values to the future generation and for maintaining order within the family. And this became a model not only for relations within families, but also for society as a whole, because Confucius saw the king as the father of the entire country. And so the whole country would be run according to principles of filial piety, not just individual families. He believed that there were 5 key relationships. And so remember, filial piety is the most important one, the father relating to the son. The father sets a good example, the son obeys the father. The other ones kind of follow along with this. Elders are supposed to be respected by those who are younger. Wives are supposed to respect their husbands. Husbands are supposed to protect and set a good example for their wives. And the ruler or the emperor is supposed to do the same thing for his subjects. The only exception to this was the relationship between friends, and Confucius believed that friendship was necessarily a relationship between equals. So all the other relationships are between superiors and inferiors, but the relationship of friends is one of equals relating to each other. And basically Confucius believed that if everybody was careful to take care of these 5 key relationships, that everything else in society would work itself out over time. Confucius also believed in the importance of education. By studying history and literature, he believed that human beings could build moral character. So he believed that everybody started out about the same and, not really good, not really bad, but that by studying ancient Chinese texts, that you could turn yourself into an excellent person. And this would become very important later on in the Han Dynasty. Education leads to excellence. Another philosophy that emerges around this time, and that's really different from Confucianism, is legalism. And legalism starts off with the idea that human beings are naturally evil. That is, if they're left to themselves, human beings will behave selfishly, greedily, and dishonestly. What this means is that government has to be strong if a society is going to be orderly and healthy. And what this means is that the central government must be able to pass laws in order to force people to behave well. And this means that the government has to be able to enforce harsh punishments on people who break the laws, because people will only follow the laws if they are afraid of suffering the harsh consequences of breaking them. And so this means that you would need a very powerful government, because only a powerful government could actually enforce strict laws. And this is used by future emperors of China to justify all sorts of brutal actions, but also effective actions for building up a strong Chinese government. Different approach to things is known as Taoism, and this also comes about around 550 BC, and you'll notice that's the same time period that Confucius existed. And so the legendary founder of Taoism is known as Lao Tzu, or sometimes Lao Tzu. But either way, most scholars think that Lao Tzu did not really exist, but is kind of more of a symbol that people who adopted this philosophy thought up later on. And so Lao Tzu's central teaching regarded this thing called the Tao, which translated loosely means something like the way. And Lao Tzu taught that the Tao was a secret force that ensured harmony in the universe. So it's sort of like Ma'at, if you remember that from Egyptian mythology. There is this secret, non-personal force that is eternal and kind of fills all of existence, and it ensures that harmony will reign upon the earth. And because of the Tao, Lao Tzu believed a couple of particular things about how human beings should live. He believed that the best life was a simple and joyous life. Because the Tao is eternal and the universe is necessarily harmonious, people should live simply and accept their lives and kind of enjoy daily existence. It's only when you become arrogant or you try to control the universe that things get out of whack. So you don't need to try and plan everything. You don't need to try and become rich or wealthy. All of these things lead you away from the Tao. But a simple life where you live in nature and appreciate the beautiful little things that you experience every day will lead you to live in harmony with the Tao. And if everybody simply lived in this same way, simply without desire for control or power, then everything would be fine. And Lao Tzu believed that it was because certain people craved power and craved control that all of the suffering and warfare resulted. He also believed that people are naturally good. So this is the opposite of legalism. And he believed that all the government had to do was leave people alone, and that people would naturally do what was right and would naturally live this sort of simple, joyful existence. Something that complicates the philosophical landscape of China is the slow spread of Buddhism from India. So it spreads up north through the Himalayas around 100 AD. And the version of Buddhism that spreads up to China is Mahayana Buddhism, which, as you remember, it means the greater path or the greater vehicle, and this offers the hope of salvation to all human beings. And this is very different from all of the Chinese philosophies, because the Chinese philosophies are all about how to live well and how to govern the world well. But Buddhism is not about really living well or governing, but it's about saving your soul and it's about some existence beyond human life. But so all of these traditions mix up in the culture of China. Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism all become leading religious principles within China. And so even though Taoism and Confucianism are not really concerned with gods or worship, they come to be viewed as religious sages, along with the Buddha, who, remember, is actually a guy from India. So these will all mix up, and you'll actually see in a single person ideas from the Buddha and ideas from Confucianism and Taoism all mixed up. They might live in their family according to Confucian principles, but meditate according to Buddhist ideas, and then follow certain Taoist teachings about the natural world. And so, unlike in the West, where you kind of have to believe in one religion or another, in China, people are free, more or less, to mix and match from all of these different philosophical systems. And so all three of these go on to influence Chinese thought in a lot of important ways. Terms, you'll notice that they are not many. You're welcome.